And knowing that in myself, it takes a little bit of the pressure off.
Hmm.
Because any day that I have on that climb is awesome. Even if I'm having a terrible day and even if the conditions are shitty, like whatever, it's beautiful.
Why not move faster?
I'm a slow ass climber.
In this episode, Michael and I talked to Nina Williams, a professional climber and mindset coach. Now, Nina needs very little introduction. She's climbed multiple V13s and iconic highballs like Ambrosia and Too Big to Flail. And in the last 2 years, she's been really psyched on sport climbing. And I was fortunate enough to get to work on China Beach with her just last month. We reflect on the trip, and we do a video walkthrough of her Iron Rose beta at the top. We also talk about growing up climbing in New England, climbing speed and resting, and how she thinks about beta. Now, Nina's really thoughtful and introspective about her own mindset, and I was fascinated to hear how she approaches big projects and how, despite the pressures of being a pro, she finds space to climb just for herself. As always, timestamps and links are in the description below. We only had an hour, but we managed to cover a lot, and I really enjoyed the conversation, so I hope you do too.
My lighting game is good though.
Wow. Yeah, that is a
Well, that's
setup.
because this is my weird math YouTube studio.
Ooh. Yeah, I hear you're famous. You're like a famous math guy or something.
Yeah, it's a weird situation.
Have you guys have met,
So we've been at
or
the
at
same
least,
crag together, but I'm usually like herding my children, or something like that, and so it's hard for me to like meet other people. And I'm also very shy.
this is true. I
Fair.
can confirm.
It's nice to be in like a closed situation with you so that I can say hi. I'm Michael.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, good to
Yeah.
see you again.
Yeah, good to see you again.
Didn't you send Zulu in the same season?
Yeah. I did this in late June, and you did.
Nice. Yeah, I did it earlier this fall.
Yeah,
Sick. Nice job. That
oh,
route is
thanks.
amazing.
It's a good one. Yep.
How are you, Nina? How's Bishop?
Bishop was good. It was a lot. It was not a climbing trip. Um, so since I've seen you pretty much, I was working China Beach in Rumney for roughly just over a week, pretty much. And then I went home to Colorado for 2 days to kind of reset. And then I went to Bishop for 10 days. A week of that being the North Face Athlete Summit, and then the weekend being the Kragen Classic, the AAC Kragen Classic. So it was just a lot of socializing. Like all of it was amazing.
Yeah.
I consider myself a pretty extroverted person and I like recharge when I'm around people, but this was like constant social stimulation. And I didn't have like any moment pretty much to myself. So by the end of those 10 days, I was totally fried. But I came away with like so many amazing experiences and really I like once I had maybe 4 hours to myself of like total silence and just like laying on a couch and not doing or saying anything after that 4 hours, I was like, all right, cool, I'm ready again. But yeah, Bishop was great, and now I'm back in Colorado. I've just been like prehabbing pretty much. I've been having some like nagging knee and hamstring issues and elbow stuff, so I'm just trying to like get back to a good baseline.
Very cool. I sprained my shoulder on the last day, trying to do the techno start. Uh,
Oh, I believe that. Yeah.
I reached really high, and then I was feeling pretty good, so I was like, I think I can do this pretty static. And then my shoulder like popped, and I was like, oh, that was a bad idea.
Is it still
Damn.
is it still bothering you?
It's still bothering me, but it's been improving somewhat steadily. So I've been doing like ultra low intensity endurance. Anyway, we should talk about Nina's trip reflections. But one of my reflections is that I am very, very weak, like surprisingly weak. Like I could barely stay on the wall for 5 minutes, even on near vert. Trying to recover was impossible. And then hangboarding, Dan had me doing like 20 mil one arm with like a 8 mil assist. I couldn't do that even for 10 seconds. So I'm doing 20 mil, both hands, and I can barely hang on for 10 seconds. But I'm just like, how was I at all staying on the wall? Rumney.
Sheer force of will, Rajiv. If nothing else, you've got that in spades, dude.
Maybe it's a combination of that, and then you just used yourself up.
That I think there is something
Yeah.
to that.
It seemed like you had a lot of muscle memory just by the amount of time you were spending on China Beach. So you were able to you felt comfortable on those moves because you were just revisiting them again and again. But yeah, any other route.
Yeah.
You got the project blinders on there.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is going to sound mean, but there's something to be said for practicing all of rock climbing.
Yes, Nina told me this a lot, and I think there may be something to that.
Yeah.
Starting to sink in a little bit, maybe.
It's starting to sink in.
You were only there for a week, Nina.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is a tricky amount of time in New England.
It really is, yeah. I didn't plan it very well, in part because I didn't know where I would be on the route, and it was as much of a recon session for me as it was honestly like a big part of why I went out was Rajiv reached out to me on Instagram and was like, "Hey, I'm gonna be out here for these dates, and I'm looking for partners." And it's like kind of hard to find. It's hard to find like consistent partners for that climb. And it even like having someone just belay you, like it's nice to have someone else to be also climbing on the route with you. So the dates just happened to work out with, it was like right between my 2 weeks in the red that I was going to, and then the Bishop stuff. And I was like, well, I'm like, I'll just go and see how I feel on it. Cause I had tried it a year ago, last October, and was hanging it, but like I had injured my hamstring on it, and I didn't feel close necessarily. So I went back this year being like, well, I'll have a week, just see how it feels. Maybe I'll get to climb on it a couple times. And at the very least, I get to go see my family because my mom lives in Laconia, New Hampshire. So it's always like a win-win for me going out there.
And how did you first hear about the route? Like, let's dig into like some of your history with the route.
Well, I grew up in New England, so I was born in Connecticut, grew up in Rhode Island primarily, living with my mom, and then we had a condo in Lincoln, New Hampshire. So when I was little, I would go up and ski and bike, and eventually discovered climbing, and climbed a lot in Rumney. So for bouldering, Lincoln Woods was my stomping grounds for that, but Rumney was my sport climbing stomping grounds. And at the time I was climbing, 5'10", 5'11". I climbed my first 5'12" in Rumney, and I never climbed 5'13" or obviously 5'14". So I never got on any of the hard climbs in Rumney. But I just remember, I remember someone had just sent China Beach. And this may be wrong. I may just be like romanticizing it in my head. I want to say it was Brian Kim, but I'm not sure if that's true or not. There's like a 30% chance that's actually true. But I remember someone had like either just sent China Beach or just gotten on China Beach, and there was basically a top rope up. And my coach, Dana Seaton, who was always bringing us up to Rumney and encouraging us to like, do whatever up there. And also he was like in his words, reminding us not to be assholes at the crag. So he was disciplining us at the same time, but he was just like, he's like, you should try it. You should, because it's not like I ever discovered China Beach. I was just up in Rumney climbing all the time, and of course you go up to that wall and you're like, oh yeah, obviously this is like one of the best lines ever.
Right.
And I never thought that it was achievable for me because I was just at such a low end of the climbing grade spectrum at the time. And Dana was like, "Well, just tie in on the other end of the rope and just like go play on it." And I was like, "All right, why not? Like nothing to lose." So I was on top rope and like got up through the beginning moves. I think I got to like basically the bottom of the undercling section through all the white squiggly parts, but and it was like, oh yeah, cool. All right, that's it. And I got off again, not really thinking anything seriously about the route, being like, wow, it would be really cool to try this again someday, but didn't just wasn't in my scope of reference really. So didn't try it again for a long time. I moved away from New England, moved to Colorado when I was 20, primarily bouldered my whole climbing life. And then, really, in the past 2 years or so, I've gotten way more into sport climbing because I wanted to supplement my bouldering with a different type of movement, learn something new about climbing, and tried China Beach, I think like maybe a year and a half ago because why not? Like it's been my childhood, like not obsession, but a childhood thought, right? This thing that as a young climber, I remember being really attached to, or at least attaching those memories of Rumney to. So I tried China Beach, was like, oh wow, this thing's really, really, really hard. I hadn't sent 514 at that time. Had only done like a handful of 513s, but was just like, all right, like I want to do this sometime in my life. And so I'm going to, commit to it. And the commitment continues.
And what was that first try like? So you were getting into sport climbing, but in the last year and a half, you've gotten, I think it's fair to say, really, really into sport climbing. And when you last tried China Beach, you were, probably bouldering as strong or maybe stronger than you are now, but hadn't been into sport climbing for that long, but had sport climbed before. Like what was that? What was China Beach like that kind of first serious trip?
So on that first serious trip, so this was October of 2021, I had been sport climbing pretty consistently for about 7 or 8 months at that time. I had just, and most of it in rifle. So I had just sent a pretty hard for me 13D called Simply Red in rifle.
We were there.
And
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we were
yes.
there.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
God, that had been such a battle for me. But my climbing style was still very much a bouldering style. Like I was trying to power my way through a lot of the moves and was thinking about rock climbing in terms of like bouldering cruxes. So I went to Rumney for 2 weeks on that trip, thinking like, oh, maybe I'll send it, or maybe, we'll just see what happens. Like part of my mind was hoping it could be my first 514. So I went with not a ton of expectation, but not a ton of strategy either, because I just didn't know what to expect. So I just remember I did all the moves really quickly, was putting them together, but ultimately didn't have the endurance or the technique, like the sport climbing head that I've now realized I have more of 2 years later. I was like trying really hard on a lot of the moves. So especially the move in the undercling, like the rock over move, when you get that really high foot, and you like rock over in the undercling. Every single time that move felt hard for me from the bottom, and I was like really yarding on it. And it was on that move that I ended up popping my hamstring a little bit because I was trying to boulder my way through it. And my hamstring, this is my left hamstring, it was also weakened because of the beta I have to do at the top, So instead of the iron cross that everyone does, I do, as Rajiv has dubbed it, the iron rose. um, and and that trip was spent like, I think I had weakened my hamstring because I was refiguring out that beta a lot. So I was doing that heel hook a lot, putting a lot of stress on the hamstring, not stretching, not really taking care of myself as much as I should have. So, yeah. And then something I forgot to mention, I think, so it wasn't on that trip that I discovered the Iron Rose beta. It was like, I don't even
Hmm.
remember. I don't remember when exactly. I don't remember when I discovered that beta, but I do remember like I would play on China Beach periodically whenever I went to visit home. Um, and it was on one of those trips where I was like, pulled my way through the bottom, got to the top, was trying to do the iron cross, trying to like dyno for the holds. I can span between the holds, like between the side pull and the very far right side of the
Mhm.
ledge that everyone goes to, but I'm at like full extension and I couldn't like move between it all. So I don't know. I just started fucking around up there and like cleaning holds above and like trying to. It's like it turns into this puzzle. It's like there
Mhm.
has to be a way. There must be a way. So it was discovering that sloper up top and then thinking about how to use my legs to span, like anything I could do. But once I discovered that beta, that's when China Beach became serious for me because I was like, oh, like I can do it because I can do the moves, and so it's possible in some way.
So many things to dig into. Before we go any further, I forgot. We should all put on a voice note backup just in case we lose audio.
I'm already
Um,
recording a
so
backup.
just, well, one of us is a professional YouTuber and already has an audio
Yeah.
backup.
Okay, voice
We're
note,
on-siting
backup
this
voice note.
podcast. Awesome.
So
uh,
we've heard rumors of other people doing this beta at the top, but we've never seen any footage or anything of maybe this different or this different beta at the top that you're describing other than you. Have you heard of anyone else doing it or seen any other one else's using this kind of beta?
I haven't seen anyone, but it's been confirmed that oh my gosh, I'm totally blanking on his name.
Alex Waterhouse.
Waterhouse,
Yeah.
Alex Waterhouse has done maybe a similar type of
Okay.
beta. He hasn't described it in detail to me, but he's seen the clip that Rajiv
Hmm.
was pulling up, and he said that he did it basically that
Yeah.
same way, that he had to figure out some kind of heel hook beta.
And I know Lizzie Asher and Mike Patz were trying it around the same time back when I still lived up there, and they had something else up there as well, but I don't think I remember what it was. So it might have been kind of similar.
Yeah.
They
There are
describe
some like
they almost
razor.
described like going straight up instead of making one move up and then going to the left. So I don't know. It seems
There's
really
definitely
gnarly.
some like weird. I think there's some really tiny crimp options.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's always a way, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, Charlotte Durif mentioned some really tiny crimps. You want to maybe like talk through what's going on here? Because I was going to try this beta actually on my last day. That was the number one goal, and then I sprained my
I
shoulder
feel
on the
that would
warm up.
break you.
Well, many things would break me, Michael. But I'd love to just hear like, what is the beta like from your experience as we walk through this, and what other things do you think would work? Because there are a few kind of shorter climbers trying it. Um, I think you mentioned Adriana, uh,
Hmm.
and a lot of people have been curious about this beta, and I think you're the only one with Iron Rose on film.
Nice. Yeah, so you get into the T rest here. That's not even a rest, but so the key thing for me is this foot cross. So my left foot is on like the standard foot that everyone kind of uses, but I cross my right foot to this tiny edge. It's like, I don't know, what feels like a quarter of my pinky nail in width. And it's really sharp. I actually punched a hole through one of my shoes doing this move. But I cross right foot to this slightly higher, very sharp toe, and then I kick my left foot, my left toe out to the ledge. And then on my right hand, when I do all these moves, all 4 fingers are in the side pull hold, but after I get my left foot out, I drop my pinky so that I can get a little bit more reach with my right hand. And then I go left hand up to the sloper, up, and then I have to close hand crimp the sloper. And then
what is that slope? How good is that sloper?
It's there. It's enough. Is
it actually a hold, or is it like a spot on the?
It's a hold. I think it's a hold. There's not like a big lip on it, but it's enough to just like dead hang
Okay.
from. And definitely feels like not so great in the sun. So from here, I bring my right foot up, and then I switch the toe to a heel. That's really crucial because then I can sit on my left heel and hamstring. And then I like have to shift my weight underneath and rows to the jug. And then the key thing for here is I have to make sure to flag my right foot up and kind of hold the barn door. Yeah.
Right. You're putting a lot of pressure on this right foot.
Mm-hmm.
And then oh yeah, go ahead.
No, keep going.
Oh, I was
going
to say,
my question logically goes after yours.
And then you started, I don't think I have a clip handy, but you started going to this sort of intermediate.
Yeah, towards the end of the trip, I started bumping into this crimp that's on the face. I'm not sure if it helps anymore than it.
Like to slow the unwind or something?
Yeah, to kind of shift my weight over more incrementally. But I was pretty tired by the end of that trip, so it might have just been like the slightly more
tired beta.
I don't know, tired beta.
So is this the crux of the route now for you?
Probably. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it'll probably be the crux. My best go on it on the route was the hard crux for me is still going from the underclings and dead pointing the crimp at the break.
Okay.
But I've like figured out all the micro beta I could possibly figure out, and so I'm hoping I wrote it all down. So I'm hoping next time I go out there, I won't have to waste so much time like refiguring that out. Yeah. But my best go, I from the bottom, I made it through up to the break through that move, but was so pumped still. And so made it a few moves past that and fell going for the T sure. hold section.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you were on that.
And you rest there.
I do rest there. Yeah. So I'm hoping that if I can get there and I can rest a little bit more, then maybe the last boulder problem won't be like quite so crazy. But.
Right. That's really interesting. Because for someone my size, I mean, I apologize, but the top was by far way easier than the rest of it.
Yeah.
Even the Iron Cross. But I guess that's just how this game is played, right?
Yeah. Height is a mindset. I've said that, I say that quite a bit in my like workshops and stuff. Like height, I can't change my height, but I can change my beta. I can change like my strength. I can change, my body positions. So I always focus more on like what's easier for me as a short person versus a tall person. Because the bottom section is really it's not that bad for me. And I know some taller folks struggle. So.
Oh yeah, because it pushes our butt out more in the.
It's hard to fit into that box.
Good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good point.
And now that I've like figured out the movement for the undercling section, like I feel like I'm flowing more through the moves compared to my last trip in October 2021 where I was bouldering through the moves. Like now I feel like I'm just holding on enough to where I don't fall off, right? But I'm not wasting any extra energy. So.
I got a question for you on the way you climbed the whole route. why not move faster?
I'm a slow ass climber.
Well, to add more context around that, I try to move as fast as possible. I think I have a lot of stories about, being a big climber and generally weak. And so I just try and like run up the route as quickly as possible. And that sometimes, bites me. But one of the things I saw as the trip went on is you climbed the bottom, especially the bottom section, slower, more and more slowly, and took more and more little pauses. And you were somehow getting higher and higher. And I thought that was super interesting. And I'm wondering if you have kind of reflections on why that was. But also, in between those little rests and shakes, why not climb faster?
Fair point. I think again, I'm still learning. There's still so much for me to learn and absorb as a sport climber. And my partner actually told me, like, as he's seen me grow in sport climbing over the past couple years, he was like, told me that I was entering and maybe still am in my sloth stage, which like when I was in the bouldering stage of my sport climbing, I was just trying to power my way through everything. And then I learned how to rest. So then, especially on Zulu, Michael, you'll probably appreciate this. Like I would get through, the bottom moves of Zulu, and then I would rest and get everything back in the jug, and then like climb through the middle section. And like every single move, I was trying to get a shake. But again, just finding any rest that I could. And so similar to a sloth, just like I'm still learning how to fight through the pump and climb faster while still being able to recover with speed. I haven't quite figured it out yet. So with China Beach, like, yeah, you're right. Every single move, like in between the transitions of each move, I would like do a little shake, do a weird little shake just to get like any kind of rest back. Cause that's still how I know how to recover.
Well, and you were also coming off like a successful rifle season and having just been in the red or something. Like not full-time Rumney climbing, which full-time Rumney climbing is maybe pushes one towards climbing faster.
Yeah, Rumney is you got to be a sprinter sport climber.
Yeah.
In Rumney, and the red is like the exact opposite.
Yeah.
But like the red, I and that was kind of why I went into Rumney with little expectation, because I was coming back from the red, and I was like, I don't know, I'm like really good at open handing and just like hanging on my shoulder blades, but it was good to have that base of endurance for me to build it up.
Yeah, open handing and hanging on your shoulder blades, a thing you never do on China Beach.
Not at all.
There are 0 times when you can do that without serious core engagement. But you found some, aside from all of the numerous little shakes and kind of body positions where you could, take a breath, you shook out a long time at the break and a long time at the T hold at the top before the iron rose. And you didn't at the beginning of the trip. Like you didn't look super comfortable in those positions. Like what kind of changed for you as the trip went on?
Just familiarity of the movement, a little bit of muscle memory, and then building endurance on the route too.
I've seen people shake out at the break before, and I don't understand.
I think it helped shaking out before the break, like I can't remember if it was even before or after doing the move, but like kind of shaking out in the underclings, which are better holds.
I like shook between moves in the underclings.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, which, that was helpful. But once it was the break, it was like kind of game on.
I also get in the break, in the right hand holds, there's a crack in the far back part of that hold, and I can get my fingers in that crack and then rest my thumb on this little like feature in the crack hold.
Oh, that's very interesting.
So that helps. That helps too.
Yeah, maybe I didn't know about that. Or
I got that beta from Josh.
Or I don't know.
It's a small crack hold. I got that beta from Josh Levin a while back. That was helpful. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I couldn't quite get my fingers in, and it requires an adjustment move. But if you can get it, it looked like you shook out there for a while.
Just trying to rest.
Like, do you think you'll try to move faster, or kind of just play it by ear, see how it goes?
Um, it's a good question. So I think I'm gonna try and go back in the spring. I really have to get my hamstring back in full health before I go try it. And I've realized I have to have a little more power endurance. So for a while I was worried about not having enough strength for the climb, but I'm kind of past that headspace on it. I know that I'm strong enough. I just have to be able to be strong for that extended period of time. So I'll make my training a little more specific. So knowing that I will be on the route for roughly 8 minutes or so, I might try and do a bunch of boulder problems, like repetitive, kind of hard boulder problems in the course of 8 minutes. And then, yeah, just like for me, climbing outside as much as possible and getting on as many like different outdoor climbs I think is going to be the best training, because I can train like indoors as much as I want, but just being on the route, like I'll probably go to Rumney for a month, right? And especially in the spring, knowing that it's going to seep, knowing that the weather conditions will
Mhm.
be harder to deal with, like I'm going to plan for it a little bit more, but uh, I think it's going to boil down to strategy, luck with the weather, and then just like remembering all my beta and being able to get back into it really quickly.
Yeah, the so power endurance and climbing lots. You posted about Will Gadd's essay on just climbing outside a lot versus training. Yeah, how do you think about climbing outside a lot versus training right now in your, you know, you've done a lot of both at this point.
Yeah, this is really recent. So Will Gadd wrote an article for Climbing Mag called something like "Training Isn't as Hard as You Think It Is," or something like that. And it's a pretty hilarious rant. Like it's an actual rant of Will calling out like this mindset around or this trend of like training for climbing, and it's all training indoors. It's hangboarding, it's front levers, it's one arm pull ups, um, anything that's like specific to the physicality of like climbing musculature, so your fingers or your shoulders or your pecs, but not really anything about the experience of climbing, of going outside, dealing with temperatures, dealing with I don't know, like just driving to the crag, mentally preparing for failure, for going out, investing a lot of time in something, and then not doing it. Like the experience of climbing is so much different from the muscular training the muscles of climbing and even the motion, the movement of climbing. Because obviously you can climb indoors and get an idea of that movement, but you still don't get that awareness of what it means to be outside. Um, in climbing. And that's something I've like just been thinking about this whole past summer. Like I had an experience this past summer. I don't want to get into it here, but I had an experience on the diamond this past summer where I was forced to recognize that there's like an awareness of being in the mountains that you just don't get in the gym or in training. And I also recognize the privilege that I have and that a lot of people don't have of access to the outdoors, of having the time and the energy and the money to spend going outdoors. Um, like many people don't have that luxury. So I understand there's like that side of it, but if you want to like get really good at outdoor projecting or if you want to send your project, like the very best way is to climb outside as much as you can. And Will touches on that in his article a little bit. I mean, he says like, if you don't live somewhere where there's outdoor climbing, move. If you're dating someone who doesn't rock climb, break up with them and date someone who does rock climb. Like
Wow.
he's going full, full rant. And whether it's realistic or not, right? Those are the things he's pointing out. So for me, um, I've like been climbing for 20 years, and a big portion of that was having again the privilege and the support to go travel to all these different climbing areas outside. go on long climbing trips and build that base. While at the same time, like moving from New England to Colorado, where the training scene, the indoor training scene is huge in Colorado. So hand in hand, like I'm also a total gym rat. Like I love climbing indoors. I love training. I love seeing that very controllable, measurable progress and being like, oh yeah, like I'm sending my indoor training goal or something. Like I can hang on a 6 mil edge or I can do a 1 arm pull up. And I've really gotten sucked into the training side of it over the past few years as my time has gotten more limited and I'm starting to do things outside of climbing. I'm trying to develop like a career and friendships and relationships that have a little bit more to do than just rock climbing. But at the same time, like going out sport climbing and just climbing outdoors as much as possible, I'm like, oh yeah, it's this reawakening, a reminder of how much like just trying hard outside can do for you. And it's helping me with my sport projects now, and I'm hoping it actually translates back into like a reignited passion for bouldering. Because one of the reasons why I started sport climbing is because I got so burnt out on bouldering and just trying to like revisit that a little bit down the line, but like rediscover a passion for climbing that I have kind of lost a little bit. Long answer. Sorry.
Cool. Super cool.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's a lot to dig in here. We could dig into kind of the specifics on what you learned on the crux, memorable moments, or other just open reflections on the trip. Kind of what do you want to dig into?
I don't know. Like, I guess I don't have much to say that hasn't already been said in terms of the climb, other than like I look at China Beach as I've looked at other projects throughout my life. I look at China Beach as a lifetime thing, and I see climbing as a lifetime endeavor. And I want to send China Beach, but even more than the send, like I just want to spend time on China Beach. Like I want the experience, and I'm willing to spend the rest of my life on it if necessary. And knowing that in myself, it takes a little bit of the pressure off. Because any day that I have on that climb is awesome. Even if I'm having a terrible day and even if the conditions are shitty, like whatever, it's beautiful. And Rumney like is beautiful. I have such a deep appreciation for the area, in part because of my history and my childhood. Like it's just great. So I think something I would want other folks to take away from this podcast and from my experience is like whether you're working China Beach or whether you have some outdoor goal or even not, like even if you're climbing in the gym and you do just want to focus on like the training aspect of it, like whatever it is that drives you, just know that you have your whole life to work towards it. And don't be afraid to pick a goal that you can spend your whole life working on. But as long as you're like psyched on it, as long as it's something that brings you joy, even in the really hard times of the progress of when you're working on it, or the regression, right? Because there's always going to be times of regression. Progress is not linear. As long as there's that core desire of like, I just want to do this thing because it inspires me, for X, Y, and Z, like having that kind of goal it's such a unique and amazing feeling. And something that in climbing, like you can find so many parallels between life and climbing in that way. So whether it's a climbing goal or a career goal or a friendship, relationship goal, like, I don't know, find something that inspires you.
Oh, I love that. I mean, and I resonate with that a lot. And I felt we were in a similar headspace on the trip, despite you being way infinitely closer to sending than I am. but that the fact that we connected on that surprised me a little bit, because you are a professional climber, and I think one of the things that have some admiration for is that you've managed to kind of separate your climbing goals or kind of create this space to have climbing goals that are lifetime goals for you, that are just, you know, routes you want to climb on. Has that always been the case, that you've just been inspired by outdoor climbs independent of your sort of career as a pro climber and the pressure to kind of send things?
Yeah, I think actually Dana, my coach, like really laid the foundation for me to make my career into uh something relatable to other people, but also like to make sure that it was for myself. So when I first started getting interested in sponsorships, I got into like the career side of it because I just didn't want to pay for gear. Like I didn't have the money, and climbing gear is expensive, and I'm like, how can I get this stuff for free? Like what can I give you instead of money? And I remember Dana being a little like salty about it and being like, you know, you're just going to be a walking billboard, right? Like, and I'm like, yeah, but, but he was like, okay, well, if you're going to go down this path, just know that like, however, whatever grade you're climbing, that's just a way to get your foot in the door. But the real contribution you have as someone who's representing these brands and being a professional climber, like what you can give is yourself and your like how you can connect to people. Like what are you giving back to the community? Whether that's inspiration, new ideas, you know, your time to volunteer or teach. Like it's more than like my own climbing is mine still, even though like
Mm,
you know, I try to balance those boundaries in terms of like ego, and because of course there's pressure to send and there's pressure to
mm,
like do things right, but I remind myself that like I'm doing these things because I want to do them, and that's my climbing, and my climbing is separate from my professional climbing. Whereas my
mm,
professional climbing is what I'm giving back again in the workshops that I do, the mental coaching, the teaching, the storytelling of myself, my relatability. So like having those two things separate for me has been key to just keeping that motivation, because ultimately like I'm going to climb no matter what, whether I'm sponsored or not. And I'm not going to be a professional climber forever. That's actually something trying to move away from, again, in like trying to be like a coach, or I'm trying to be an athlete consultant or something else that's separate from my climbing. But my climbing will always be mine.
my climbing will always be mine. I mean, that's a mindset a lot of people can um, take something away from. There's a lesson in there about keeping that space kind of safe and sacred, keeping your climbing your own. I had a friend ask me like why I care so much about China Beach, and this is when I hadn't climbed for 2 years and was just very out of touch. And I told him like I don't really want to dig into it. That's a box I don't need to open. I can just be grateful that it exists and has always existed and will probably get me back into climbing at some point. And maybe you don't need to question that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you started down this path of like sponsored climber world, did it start with this separation between you as an athlete and you as, or maybe not you as an athlete, but you as your sends and you as your contributions, or have you worked over the years to weight it towards contributions other than just hard rock climbing?
In the beginning, it was definitely more about, it was 50-50, maybe
Mm-hmm.
even 60-40, you know, because again, a budding athlete, the emphasis is on your resume,
Right.
like what you've
Right.
sent, you know, obviously you have to establish yourself, right? Get your foot
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
door. So when I was first starting out, I was trying to climb hard, trying to make a name for myself while also like going to shoe demos,
Yeah.
you know, giving little slideshows, like
Mm-hmm.
volunteering at the gym, trying to teach, like learn how to teach people how to heel hook. Like that was one of my first intro workshops, was like how to heel hook. It was just like doing, but anything I could do to spend time with other people and share whatever limited knowledge I had at the time, to just keep sharing it. Um, but definitely a lot of like writing to companies and saying, hey, I want to go to South Africa, or I want to go to Waco Tanks or Joe's Valley, and I'll take some pictures and I'll wear your shoes or your clothes.
Yeah.
Anything I could do to just like go climbing as much as
Mm-hmm.
possible.
Mm-hmm.
That was definitely the early bits. But then as I gained more support and gained trust from my sponsors, then I had some extra time and less pressure to focus on non-climbing related things. The pinnacle of that really essentially taking 2.5 years off of extensive travel and climbing sendage to go back to school,
Mm-hmm.
to finish my undergraduate degree, and having my sponsors trust me enough to be like, and I told them ahead of time, I was like, I'm not going to be doing anything big or crazy in this time. And they were like, all right, cool.
Yeah.
But for
That's
them,
good.
it's like, as long as, I think especially for big brands, like as long as climbers are staying relevant in some way,
Mm-hmm.
this is like the professional climbing side of things. As long as I'm
Right.
telling some kind of story and showing people, hey, like I've spent all these years climbing hard and I still have a base of climbing foundation, right? Like I'm still going to keep climbing, but I'm also doing this other thing. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm taking what I've learned in climbing and applying it towards this other big goal, like school. And here's what I'm figuring out, and here's what I'm telling you. So as long as you're, I don't know, maybe it's like the teacher in me, or the storyteller in me, just always trying to give back to people things that I'm learning about and
Mm-hmm.
experiencing.
That was very forward thinking. I'm sure you were quite young when you started this like process, and that was very forward thinking to like think about setting up this other side of the career. Like that's great. And I think like Rajiv's mentioned that this is something that you see yourself helping other athletes with in the future. I don't know if we can say that.
Yeah, no, yeah, you can.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, yeah.
I'm psyched
So
on
I
it.
mean, from this story, you sound like the perfect person to do that.
Thanks. I will say it helps to have people in my life asking me questions about, being a little skeptical about my path as a professional climber,
Right.
being like, well, like, what are you going to do afterwards? It was Dana, my coach. It was also my
Yeah.
parents being like, is this a real job? Like, what are you going to do? And I
That's
remember
fair
telling
of
my,
them.
yes, very
Yeah.
fair
That's
and forward thinking of them too.
yeah.
And I remember kind of making this offhand comment to my dad, being like, "Well, I don't know, I'll just like work for one of my sponsors when I get older." This is when I was probably 16, and it's actually working out pretty well. But I think just encouraging climbers, whether you're young or you're older, like whatever, encouraging climbers to have something more than climbing, to like think
Yeah.
outside of the climbing
Yeah.
bubble,
Like
to
if you had,
have
for
like,
example, just like only rock climbed for your sponsors, then they wouldn't trust you to take another role in the future, right? So it was good to start doing that early
yeah,
on.
yep.
Total direction change. We have a question from Daryl,
Mm.
who you climbed with, and he wants to know if you have any thoughts on how you assimilate beta. And I think to add more context from myself, every one of your attempts, it seemed like you made 5 times more progress than every one of my attempts in terms of how quickly your beta refined. For example, a lot of the harder sections went through iterations, like the really high foot, move on the bottom that I've just been calling the move. It started out pretty kind of forced and bouldery, and then it got super static, and then it became dynamic again and looked a lot easier. And then that move out of the break, like you went pretty deep on the move to the crux crimp, and just kind of, you were very methodical about trying lots of different things. And then you just execute all of your beta and make little refinements along the way. Like, how do you assimilate beta?
God, it's a good question. I guess I just think about what's working and what's not working. Um, and I don't know how, I guess this is a good question because I don't
I got
quite know how to answer it.
I got another
Like,
angle for that.
I
Yeah.
have an
What
idea.
level of detail do you think about beta as you're climbing, and like how much of your brain is I'm going to execute this sequence, and at what level of detail are you just like I will just climb with my sort of intuitive brain?
Wait, I want to hear, Michael, what's your idea?
Okay.
Oh,
'Cause-
my idea was the fact that you have many, many more days climbing outdoors per year than Rajiv or I. Like, for example,
yeah.
I live in Virginia, but it's so hard to go to the New because my kids are nightmares in the car that almost all of my climbing in the year is the 6 weeks that I spend in Rifle, which I'm like so happy to be able to spend 6 weeks in Rifle because I have an academic job or whatever. But I mean, that means I'm essentially only climbing in the gym between Rifle and Rifle. And I know back in previous times in my life when I was able to climb outdoors more, I was a more intelligent outdoor climber. Like all of my training metrics are way better now, but like I'm not as good at rock climbing. Yeah. So
I mean,
I don't know.
yeah.
Like I would wager that that's part of it. Maybe there's something more subtle that, anyway, I don't know.
Right. No, I think that's spot on. I think it would be a disservice to not bring that up again. And again, I'm acknowledging the privilege that it takes to climb outside as much as possible, but undeniably, the sensation of climbing outdoors is such a buildup for me. And I've climbed outdoors in so many areas that, Rajiv, when you ask me like what my thought process is or what I'm thinking about with beta, it's not like I don't really think about it in terms of this dialogue. It's actually a library of sensations in my body. So, what does my foot feel like right in the middle of the sole of my foot as I'm pressing, and how is it affecting my hip, and how is that, affecting the angle of my hand going up to the crimp, or like, but even as I'm saying that verbally now, it's not like I'm thinking that as I'm climbing. It's like the sensation and feeling in my body, and then remembering what that sensation feels like on the next go and being like, oh yeah, that sensation felt really good. I'm going to do that again. Or, ooh, that other move, that sensation, I felt really off balance and insecure. So I'm going to try and change that. It's like what I imagine, if you're memorizing letters for a spelling bee, it's kind of like the body's version of that, how to memorize like the spelling of the beta, but with your body.
That's a
sounds
really
like
interesting description.
Sounds like a type of a very tight dialogue between kind of the mind and body, like mind-body connection, I guess. And the sensations is something that's interesting to hear, because I don't know that I've thought about climbing in that way. Like, yes, there's how the holds feel, of course, like your fingertips, fingers and toes, but then, often I have this very visual picture of a body position. But I've also felt a lot of what Michael describes, like not climbing outside for a very long time. Everything just feels less fluent.
Yeah. Fluent, actually, just pointing, again, connecting body movement with language. There's less of a fluency of that language the less you practice it outside. So, good word choice.
I kind of want to hear more about sarcasm. We've talked a lot about Zulu and how, in some ways, it prepared you. You became more of a sport climber. You started thinking about the sequences less in terms of separate boulder problems and more as sentences. Zulu is very different from China Beach in terms of the physical flow and physical demand. What was your experience on sarcasm? What did you learn from it? Did it kind of give you anything that really changed your experience of China Beach?
I would say, Rajiv, have either of you made it up to sarcasm? Have you seen it or tried it? No. Okay. So Sarchasm is a 14A at the base of the Diamond. Well, really at the base of Chasm Lake up in Rocky Mountain National Park, and it is so different from both Zulu and China Beach in that it's like dead vertical, very technical, like not burly or physical in any way, maybe like for some slight moves, but it's all about the beta. And I would say the only like benefit it gave me in terms of China Beach was actually breaking that 514 barrier. So Sarchasm was my first 514. And I think just having that
that's proud. We should stop and say that's a proud first 514.
Thanks. I have to give a lot of credit to Amity, Warme, who was working it at the same time. Well, she was working it before me, and I came up as she was working it. I was actually there the day that she sent it, and that was her 514 as well. And she gave me a ton of really great beta that, I think she did Sarchasm. It took her like 8 sessions or so, and it took me about 4. But a huge part of that was because I watched Amity and she was like, yeah, you do this, this, and this. And like, again, half the battle of Sarchasm is beta. So big props to her. She was a big help in that. So just having that mental barrier of like, oh, I've sent 514. Cool. Like that helped me a ton with Zulu. But Zulu was really the next ceiling for me to break in terms of like what it meant to work a hard route. Because Sarchasm, it's like Sarchasm is also 7 miles round trip hiking. So like 3.5 miles up, 3.5 miles back down. And it's also dealing with weather too. And it's at elevation. Yep. It's at 13,000 feet. So just again, like the commitment, just going up to a route and being like, all right, I don't know what's going to happen today, but I'm going to like refine the beta and the experience. So, yep.
Wow. Yeah, that's a proud first of the grade. Almost as proud as your first 13 at Waimea, which you also did on the trip.
Yeah.
Nina flashed butt bongo fiesta.
Oh, nice. That was good. That was my first 513. Yeah.
Nice. Yep.
No, it's good. Yeah.
Yeah. I had never sent 513 at Waimea until this most recent trip.
Nice.
So that was fun.
So what?
Although, oh yeah, go ahead, Michael.
You had like a hard out at 2, right? Didn't you have something to do at 2? Oh wait, but it's a different time there.
I have a hard stop at noon. I can go like 10 minutes far. I have a call at 12:30.
Yeah. Okay, so I mean, I thought that at least we should talk about what your sort of rock climbing plans are upcoming. But if you have something in between this and that, Rajiv.
Oh, I was gonna say the although is, as we found out from Dan Nguyen, you also climbed the first 13B at Rumney pretty early on in the trip, which is China Beach to the break.
Oh yeah, so I guess that's technically my first 13 at Waimea.
Wait, that was the first 13 at Rumney?
Okay, so Michael, you have to listen to you haven't listened to our last episode that you were on, where I showed the clip. To recap, Dan Nguyen did it to the break first, and at the time, it was only bolted to the break, and the hardest thing at Rumney was 13A. Mm-hmm. There were no 13Bs or 13Cs at Rumney, and he had never sent a 13B. So although John Mallery, who he points out is taller and had a hard time on the bottom with the cramped boxes, John Mallery had a hard time with the bottom and said he thought it was 13C. Dan said, I've never sent a 13B. I'm going to call it 13B. Mm-hmm. And so it was like the hardest route at Rumney for a brief moment, and then immediately was bolted to the top by John because he was like, Dan, you didn't do the route.
John Mallery is hilarious.
He sounds hilarious.
Did you guys never climb with him?
No, I've never met him.
Yeah, when I started climbing, so I started climbing in Rumney in 2005. It was when I started grad school in New York. And him, John Mallery, and Dan were climbing together for probably those first 2 or 3 years that I was up there. And for the first year or so, Dan was like, "Why are you coming here? Why aren't you just climbing the Adirondacks? Why are you here?" But then eventually, like I won his good graces.
It's like, we don't want any of you outsiders climbing here.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Okay, so you have plans of going back in the spring?
Yep, I'll plan to go back in the spring. In the meantime, I'm trying to get back to a baseline of fitness. So let's see, it's November, almost end of November right now. So I'm gonna spend the rest of November and December like rehabbing my knees, my hamstring. I've got some elbow tendonitis going on. So basically I'm gonna be climbing in the gym more often. Also, it's like pretty cold and wet in Colorado right now, so gym climbing's the standard, but I'll get outside as much as I can. I've got some sport projects out in the Flatirons that I'm gonna work on. And then I'm trying to get like 2 different types of minor surgeries. I'm trying to get LASIK surgery and I'm trying to get my tonsils out. So we'll see how that affects everything. But
I
so
had
basically,
the LASIK.
Yeah, do you like it?
You'll be fine. Yeah,
Okay.
I like it a lot. Yeah, you'll be fine.
Yeah, I hear it's pretty chill.
Yeah,
but
story.
I had tonsils too, but I was like 4 years old, so I can't tell you about that.
I know, dude, my tonsils are gigantic. I've been showing people, I'm not exaggerating when I say they are this big in my throat. Like, it's crazy. Yeah, it's bad. So I'll spare you the visual, but pretty much January, February, I'll be training. I just want to like climb outside as much as possible. See if I can do like a couple more 14s before going back out to Rumney, making sure that I'm healthy. Just continuing.
Yeah, there's some good ones in the Flatirons, right? Isn't that where Thunder Muscle is?
Yes, Thunder Muscle. Yeah, I want to do Thunder Muscle. I want to do the Walrus. There's another 14 I'm psyched on called Call Me Daddy, which is this link up at the Hillbilly Crag. Cool. Yeah, I mean, it's Colorado. Like, there's a ton of great outdoor training here. So
yeah, that's true.
Psyched.
And then summer, are you back in rifle at all?
I don't really know what my summer plans are yet. I always oscillate between like I really want to get more into trad climbing and big wall climbing. I also like I want to kind of get back into bouldering, maybe go to Gold Bar in Washington. I don't know. I don't know yet. I got to figure it out.
It's long enough away that you don't have to have this figured out.
Yeah.
For anybody listening to the podcast who's in Rumney in the spring, somebody please do some maintenance work on the top of China Beach and divert some streams so we can get it dry by the time Nina comes into town.
Hey, I'll do that work myself too. Like I think I know it has to be done. There's just a bunch of moss that like seeps just right on top of the rock ledge. So it's like if you get that moss off and then rake some of the leaves off or whatever, like I don't know, I'll just do it.
And maybe wire brush that sloper so it's not lichen covered.
I'm gonna bring a wire brush with me. Yeah, and calling anyone who's working China Beach for partners, Rajiv, I hope to see you out there.
Yeah.
Michael as well.
I probably can't make it for a month, but I will try to make it out there.
Nice. Would be fun.
Yeah. That was a great time. I think one of the things that was really fun was just the people. It's there's so much detail on the route, and just working beta with people on that route when it's so fun to climb. I felt like I was learning from watching everybody climb as well. You're not just learning from your own go. You're not just waiting for your own go. Everybody's learning constantly. And there's a lot of beta exchange. Like you got some beta from Josh. There was stuff that Kara had figured out, or stuff that John Brock mentioned, some of the subtleties about that correct sawtooth crimp. So yeah, I love that exchange.
Yeah, well, I mean, shout out to you, Rajiv, for creating this community around China Beach. Like I think it's so cool that there's like an Instagram and a podcast, but really like you just reaching out to me and being like, hey, I'm going to be at China Beach for these dates. Like you were a big motivation behind bringing all these different people together and trying the route. Like the trip to Rumney was one of the best I've ever had. Just hanging out under China Beach, like with folks, talking about beta, but just like I don't know, just having that community. That's what it really comes down to. So, yeah, thanks for having me on this podcast, but even more thanks for like bringing us all together and giving us, purpose. That's more than just the rock climb.
Wow. That's thanks for saying that. Didn't some part of you think this person is crazy, like has a podcast on a single route?
Yes, 100%.
Okay.
I was like, wow, this dude is psyched. This dude is like on another level. But that's what it takes. You got to be on another level. Yeah, I think it's great. I think the world needs more of that.
Any kind of parting thoughts or people we should have on the podcast?
Yeah, I mean, you should get Dave on the podcast. You should get, I think Josh Levin would be a good person. He sent it. Might have some good beta insights. Kara, she's working the route too. Like whoever, keep the archive going.
Hell yeah. Any last thoughts or questions, Michael?
No.
Awesome. It's great to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. Yeah.
Hope we can climb sometime.
I know. I'm going to be in Rifle at some point next spring. I mean, I love that place. So
yeah. I mean, I'm living in Colorado. It's probably hard not to go at least once or twice during the season.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yep.